diagnosis encourages the process that has caused the diagnosis to be made. If one goes into A&E with a broken arm, then the doctor would state, you have a broken arm and we'll put it in plaster until it gets better. There is the assumption that it will get better, and once it is better, one can, for example, drive a car again. But when you are presented to a psychiatrist, you are told that you are schizophrenic, bipolar, depressive, etc. This is significant. Psychiatric diagnoses posit themselves to describe the entirety of who you are and the processes of reality you are engaged in. You and your whole life becomes a disease. So if one's whole life is a disease, one will behave in a dysfunctional way. If the entire persona is ill, then the only behavior that is possible is an ill one. So one makes oneself ill because one is ill. And there is nothing else one can be, through the illness encompassing the entirety of self and becoming a definition of self. I use the term illness for convenience only. My preferred description is realistic emotional distress. R.D. Laing once said that schizophrenia is a tactic evolved by the schizophrenic to help him live in an unlivable situation. I think this statement is interesting. We become dysfunctional in order to escape dysfunction. Often those who have been abused, and this includes myself, seek abuse because if they continue to be abused, it can be assumed that abuse is normal, and as such being abused is not one's fault. So, if I'm schizophrenic, and I use this term for convenience, I live as a schizophrenic, I use this term for convenience only, because not fitting in is an inevitable, rather than being one's fault in any way. Yeah. For many years, using both my experience of the system and the experience of others I have known in the system, I have argued very strongly against genetic determinism theories. In my own understanding of genetics, genetics operates more through a system of probabilities than it does through one or two genes being directly determined. And from thence the idea of a single gene causing a phenotypical response as radical as what is called schizophrenia is unlikely. In the case of Laura, the problems are caused by the heroin, but the heroin was described as an inevitable part of an inevitable illness that she inevitably suffered from. So therefore she had no motivation to come off the heroin. It is as if I continually slapped my leg and felt pain. I could take a Panadol to cover up the pain, but more relevant is the fact of my leg being hit. If one stops the hitting, the pain goes permanently without any need to take Panadol. It would make no sense to build a tube train in the Kalahari Desert. This is not to deny a tube train can be useful. It is the fundamental of the London transport system. But for the Kalahari Bushmen, the tube train would have no relevance. This is not because Londoners are somehow more sane or less sane than the Kalahari Bushmen. It is because they experience different realities, and in consequence different things are relevant. Reality is not an absolute standard. It is something that is personal to each one of us. Prayer has been fundamental to human reality for millennia, but through the strict teachings of medical psychiatry, it will be seen as something unusual or even pathological, maybe linked to this idea of hearing voices and talking to voices. One of the reasons that one has less recorded incidents of what is called mental illness in many developing world countries as against the developed is not simply through diet and social environment. It is also because the image of a man that may be showing the symptoms is different. What is one man's schizophrenic is another man's shame. If we are to genuinely cure mental distress, one has to find out why the leg is being hit. This might involve really difficult questions about our holy cows, education, society, the family, and maybe because of the awkwardness of these questions, it is easier just to prescribe a tablet and forget about it. But if we are to find a society that is functional enough not to require the scapegoat, we have to embrace the wonderful diversity that is so much the glory of the human race, and acknowledge the right to our reality, and to be the person that one is. I remember asking a doctor with whom I had 4 5-minute appointments, I was in hospital at the time, during a period of 3 years. How long have you known me? He was silent. I said, well, we have had 4 appointments, each lasting 5 minutes. So so you have known me for 20 minutes. Is that right? He was silent. I then asked him, how long have I known me? He was again silent. He wasn't the most erudite of types. I stated that I have known myself for 35 years, which was my age at the time. So, who do you think knows me better? Thank you very much.
Just about the time it took me to get over, so we might call that a wrap. But we can laugh about our disabilities, eh? Also, it's a bit of a focal point for me, actually, 10 minutes. It's also the amount of time a psychiatrist decided to diagnose me with psychosis. 10 minutes to diagnose me with a psychosis. Okay, now that's pretty something, I think. I believe that's it's incredible, actually. Now, I'd like to talk to you today about my spiritual recovery, and that's how I view my experience. It was uniting with myself. Now, I think we're all human here in this room, and I think that we all feel emotions. And I worry, actually, about anybody who doesn't get emotional distress. You know, that's somewhat going through the motions. I mean, my hero, Bart Simpson, he said, I can remember when someone came to Springfield, and he said, are you a human being or a human doing? And Bart's reply was, a human going, okay? And he just legged it out of the room. And I suppose, like, what's so very wrong with that too, you know? I think an awful lot of us are just doing, going through the motions. I know when I fell into utter despair, into my depression, I was a human doing. I was robotic. That part of my brain that connects with the inside, it wasn't functioning. It was going. I'm glad I went through my depression. I'm glad I jumped off a 25-foot bridge and ended up with this sore leg. Now that might sound mad, actually. Well, if it is, you know, I'm glad that I reached that point. Now, it's misfortunate that I have to suffer this wonky leg, if you like to call it. But I know 100% in my heart it's going to heal. I know that. I know I'm going to do a marathon, and I know I will. And I'd like to just refer to a quote by R.D. Laing from The Politics of Experience, a Scottish psychiatrist. And he wrote about spiritual recovery. From the point of view of a man alienated from his source, creation arises from despair and ends in failure. But such a man has not trodden the path to the end of time, the end of space, the end of darkness, and the end of light. He does not know that where it all ends, there it all begins. And my interpretation and my own insight into this, it's not our darkness that we're very afraid of, it's our light. And I went through that utter dark hole to unite with myself. I mean, this was the desired state, as my very good friend Mary Maddock here, who was a former nun for 7 years, has explained to me as well. This was the desired state, to connect with oneself. I've no, you know, depression. We're all depressed, really. You know, we'd be a bit worried if we weren't. And I write poetry now on things that are close to my heart. And Mary, if you'd like to do your lovely music, wonderful musician, Mary. And actually, I'd also like to thank Mary, because Mary is the very person here who